Hi, I'm going to read another section from my book tonight from Spheres of Disturbance. And this is in the voice of one of the 15-year-olds in the book, Darla. So let's just get to it. Darla. It isn't as though she doesn't believe in history. To the contrary, Darla reveres the dates, the kings and presidents, the voyages. But she is troubled by her new and burgeoning lack of genuine interest. In the sink is another tub of cornstarch paste she mixes with her hands. History is sticky and pulls years behind it, like those New York barges toting garbage. Soon she'll add the smooth paste onto her tableau of Abraham Lincoln, surrounded by a border of Civil War states split north and south of his nose. At 15, after years of straight A's on her report card, she is flirting with one B and an arousing detour of one C. Instead of only memorizing and reporting back to her teachers the necessary, in their minds, facts and information, Darla has begun stripping off, a process Darla's best friend Ruth started and named stripping off, getting below, inside, outside, the other side of the subject at hand. As she told Ruth on the phone just before she added water to the pink tub of cornstarch, I'm into making art in every class and every class into art. Stripping off works well for Darla in contemporary American fiction, art with its mixture of modern art history and sculpture, and even in her geometry algebra class, her teacher appreciates her questions on the meanings of triangles. But in history, where the year is being spent on 19th century to the present, and biology, her teachers are not interested in being asked to provide any broader perspective. Art is not what they have in mind, regurgitation is. On the dining room table, the tableau is set on a sturdy piece of plywood and measures 2 feet wide by 4 feet high. Abraham Lincoln rises from the plains of the pale green background into a Mount Rushmore like grandeur, only it's a three-fourths head view instead of full on. She surveys Abe's face. She'll need to add to his nose. Her mother and Aunt Frances sit at the opposite end of the table. The coffee pot perches between them next to the enormous ashtray shaped like Florida in a blue, watery glaze. Kitten, do you have to do that now? Yes, Mom, I do. Her Aunt Frances is a smoker, although she sometimes sees her mom grubbing a drag or a whole cigarette. More lately. More since Frances is there almost every day. Frances has a perpetual need and says she isn't about to quit, what with all she's been through. Pointing her cigarette at the tableau, Frances asks, What is it? It doesn't make much sense upside down. It's Abraham Lincoln, Darla says. No kidding. Frances stands up, passes her cigarette to Darla's mom, walks around the table, the heel of her fried boots clicking hard against the floor. God almighty, your kid's brilliant, Marjorie. Frances puts her hand on Darla's shoulder, presses down. Brilliant, she says again. Don't I know it, Marjorie says. She takes after Joe. Frances presses down her hand so hard it makes Darla sit in the chair. Marjorie, I always say give credit where credit is due. Frances lifts her hand into Darla's hair, and the other hand joins in pulling Darla's hair back with slow, combing strokes. You are just as talented as Joe, isn't she, Darla? Darla thinks of her mom's macrame plant holders with shells and the million plants hanging in them around the house. It's a different kind of talent, Marjorie says. I'm more of a decorative artist. Coasters and mirrors trimmed with glass beads, that sort of thing, with an occasional larger piece here and there. Darla watches her mom blow a long stream of smoke. Again, it comes to her how serene her mom is when Frances is there, satisfied, not nervous, like she often is with what comes her way, which at that moment is Frances clicking her boots back to her seat and coffee cup and cigarette. Bullshit, Francis says. Pardon me, but you do more than placemats. Your wall hangings, for instance, and besides that, it all matters. Art is not to be regulated like grades of beef 100% USDA art. She pulls a cigarette out from the pack and taps it hard on the table. Listen to me, who am I fooling? I mean, I work for the industry museum, art school, galleries. To an extent, it is an assembly line, however subjective. It still comes down to who is going to shell out the money for the content with the most meat. Oil, abstract, meaning. Half the time it's just payback, investments, speculations. It gets people nuts. This is the way Francis often talks in rangy divergences. Darla listens as much for clues of Francis' alleged theft as for the way a person's conversation allows entry into how they see and organize the world. It has dawned on Darla that most people keep to a fairly predictable A to B to C route when talking. She is afraid she might fall into that category and is trying out saying incongruent things. Darla says. Avery's pot-bellied pig is going to have piglets any day. We're going to the garage sale. I'm looking for a Halloween costume and a birdhouse. Marjorie smiles. What? Francis asks. A birdhouse, Darla says, as in feathers, tweet, tweet. What garage sale? Frances asks, waving her cigarette. And who the heck is Avery? What kind of name is that, anyway? Marjorie pours more coffee into both cups. Frances taps her cigarette a few more times before lighting it. Avery is Sammy's girlfriend, Marjorie says. You know, Sammy who works for Joe, his bookkeeper. Marjorie takes a honey bear on the table and squeezes. Frances slides the sugar bowl closer to her cup. Drink, drink, smoke, smoke. Frances' left eyebrow raises up. Oh, of course, the Sapphic sisters. Never figured Sammy went that way, but love is love. Frances uses her spoon and shovels ashes out of the ashtray onto her napkin. Hey, kid, she says, use some of these for ashes for Abe's beard. We'll give it a Homeric texture. Darla lifts her pasty fingers from Abe's forehead. The napkin is pushed her way. Frances calls her kid, which means Frances can't remember Darla's name. Frances is ridiculously forgetful of names. Once she even forgot Joe's name when he said, Hi, Frances, and she stared at him with her raised eyebrow until he said, It's Joe, your brother, and added to Marjorie, These are the scary genes we're working with. Darla walks to the kitchen sink to rinse off her hands and looks outside at the beech tree shaking off its purple leaves. The sun comes, the sun goes, the clouds open, close. Darla thinks of Frances in the same way, a pulse that opens something in Marjorie and closes something in Joe. Now Frances has the singy-songy voice telling Marjorie how last night she, Frances, dressed in velvet leggings over a flowing gold damask tunic, went to Didion's party. Darla returns to the table. The ashes are too soft, and the only thing they do is turn the paste a whitish gray. She squirts in India ink, mixes with a popsicle stick, and applies some paste to Abe's chin. Frances says, They were all there, shocked as shit to see me. Imagine their faces, all lit up by the candelabra on the table behind them, like jack-o'-lanterns, exactly like. And I went right up to them. Good God, no, Marjorie says. Didn't that just add fuel to the fire? God, yes, Frances says, and pauses to offer another cigarette to Marjorie, who accepts and lights one for herself. Darla uses a palette knife to create the crests in Abe's beard. With a toothpick, she scrapes lines until the paste is no longer paste, but is wiry and stiff Abraham Lincoln hair. The smoke stacks up in the room, and Marjorie cracks the front door open. What did you say to them? Marjorie asks and sits down in the chair. Darla is waiting for the answer as she cleans off the palette knife. She looks over. Frances has leaned closer to Marjorie, her mouth cornering the cigarette. At this angle, even when she talks, the side of her mouth curves up like a Cheshire cat. I stared at them, not saying a word for a good squirmy minute. Francis says, until Gregory, of course, Gregory could not handle it. He said, my, Francis, all in stunning gold, like a stolen treasure trove. I said nothing. Already they had snorted too much and drank too much. I looked at each of them, from one face to the next, Gregory, Paul, Ricky, Sean, Libby. Then I turned and walked over to Didion, who loves high drama, and who pulled me into her arms and kissed me, a moment of pure satisfaction. The rest of the evening was gravy. You walked right to the edge, Francis. That's my comfort zone. Darla rakes more lines in Abe's beard and thinks this is what she's been doing, figuring out her comfort zone. She looks at Francis, then at Marjorie, and the question comes, who is she more similar to? Who does she want to be more similar to? But there is no answer returned to her as the front door is pushed wide open. Joe stomps in, a box from the bakery in his hand. Darla runs over to him, the smell of rushing autumn leaves and wintry wind following him in through the door, his hair almost standing straight up. My dear women, he says, provisions have arrived.